Kazi, how does a young guy that's only 33 years old do £20 million of property in London?
A little bit of stress, a lot of hard work, a lot of leveraging, you know, people that are around me, the experts to fill in the gaps that I didn't know, and then really finding a niche, homing that, and a lot of cookie cutter. So find something that works and repeat, because there's so much property out there, that you can just kind of repeat what you do when you find a strategy that works.
And do you think it's possible to repeat that now for somebody? Let's say somebody starting out now, they're the late 20s in London. Do you think they can replicate what you've done? Or
I think in terms of numbers wise, they can replicate, they can by far exceed it, because people always look at things to say that, okay, you know what, 50 years ago, property prices were this cheap. This many years ago, there was this. And there's always a reason, we look back and say, I wish I had that. But a lot of the people, like even myself, look forward and say, well, we wish we had some of the opportunities that you have at your disposal. So i.e., for example, being able to leverage, that using other people's money is way more viable and known about, rent to rent, these strategies of lower barriers to entry, the fact that you have an ability to build a personal brand, through the platforms like Instagram, YouTube,
Yes.
TikTok, etc.
so with the projects that you're doing, do you generally renovate and flip, or do you renovate then look to keep them in your portfolio for long-term rental?
So my strategy has generally been to flip.
Okay.
So buy a property, spend some money, add some value, sell for a higher price, and obviously pocket the profit after taxation. Now, obviously, the downside of that is the taxation. When you refinance, you don't, obviously, you pay that tax when you refinance. But that being said, it's, even if for example, for argument's sake, you buy a property for £500,000, you spend £200,000 all in, with your fees, and you get it revalued at £1 million, for argument's sake. Now, technically speaking, that's one of our unicorn all money out deals, because by the time you have a 75% loan to value, you pull out some, 750,000, which means you pay back the loan of 700, and you're £50,000 up, and you've got an asset that's cash flowing. But I think what people miss sometimes is that although it's not your money that's inside, it's still £250,000 that could be earning you money. And because yields aren't as high in London as they are in the Midlands or in, the north of England or other places around the UK, it's not always the best thing to do. Mm-hmm. So generally speaking, I would be guided by the market. Yeah. So I'm more than happy, my goal would be to sell. But if, for example, the rental market, which has boomed at the moment, and the premiums meant that it made sense and it presented, a good return on investment, and I do keep, and I have built a portfolio over time. But I try and build a specific portfolio more than, because what I generally do, and I think we've spoken about off camera, is residential conversions,
yes,
which don't necessarily yield the level of income that will make sense, leaving in the amount of capital based on the value of the properties in London. That being said, with the Airbnb model, serviced accommodation, there has been multipliers on those which do make it more efficient. But I think, I'm just guided by, look, if I finish a project and at the end of it, I was to market it at 500,000, and I wasn't, the best offer I was getting was 450, but the bank was saying, they'll let me refinance at 500. I'm probably going to refinance, because that's what the market has determined.
Yeah. So when you're doing that, do you, from the offset, because we were talking about creating a product for a certain type of clientele, do you then create the product in a way where it's generic, where it can actually work for rental and work for sale? Or because the way I tend to do it, when we're building for sale, we're selling, because we're putting high-end stuff in the property. If you're putting granite worktops in, I'm not putting that in a rental.
My thing is, I think sometimes I'm a bit of an emotional investor.
Yeah.
I like a nice finish. So whether or not, it's I generally build to sell.
Yeah.
However, I'm more than happy to know that, if I've created a great product, whether or not the end user is somebody renting or somebody buying, that the type of tenant that you attract for a really good product at a premium, is amazing. And as we mentioned, there's loads of people, for example, that product is their equivalent of, that's my amazing home. Maybe they still own somewhere else, but they want to rent in a specific area, and that makes sense for them. And, with the rental market the way it is now, people are almost having to send CVs to rent properties. Yeah. So the standard of tenant that you can get, I've got tenants that have been with me for 8 years plus, And I'm talking about moving for 8 years plus in HMOs, and the room still looks the same way it does when we finished a refurbishment.
Yes.
So I think, yes, you do, like on a larger scale, you've got to, kind of make sure there's a different standard towards rental, particularly maybe in the student market and other spaces. But, I think in London, we do have the luxury that if you do have that due diligence, the in-house management, maintenance, you can create a product that, even if you rent it for 2 years and you sell it 2 years later, 3, 4, 5 years later, you've still got a really good product at the end of it.
And do you tend to standardize the renovations, or do you have a cookie cutter approach? It's a case of we just kind of pick up and use that method, or
HMO wise, yes, it's pretty standardized in terms of room sizes, bathrooms, fit out of the second fix materials, so all of our M&E products. Flat conversions, not so much.
Okay.
I generally would kind of put together a design brief at the beginning. I'm a man that spends a lot of time on your Pinterest and a lot of time on Instagram seeing other people's projects, and I'll look at things and I'll be like, okay, that's cool, I can see how we can replicate that in this space. And I think that's almost where my passion is as well. That's where the fun comes in, because if you spend all your time looking at a freshly plastered wall, it gets very generic very quickly. So having something to look forward to, you're saying, okay, we've got out of the ground. Okay, the partitions are up, first fix is in, now we're plastered. Now I know, okay, great, plaster's drying, we can get some paint on the walls, can start to think about, or start to see the second fix. I think that's where the impetus to spur you on after maybe you've had a little bit of headache on the build or a little bit of problems, it can kind of keep you going as well.
Tell us about some of the projects you're currently doing at the moment.
So the one I've kind of been, I finished a commercial to residential conversion. It was just office with uppers, converted the uppers into a flat.
Okay.
Good numbers on it in terms of it's working really well as an Airbnb. Had a lot of help from my PA to systemize that, and get that on board with the other stuff. That's worked well. Probably the one I've been posting about most is my residential conversion of the 2 flats.
Okay.
That's a house into 2 flats, bought it as a repossession. It was, being used illegally as a cannabis factory. So obviously a lot of works in terms of restoring it. It was just a rear side return extension, but because of changes in Part L, which is your, insulations and things like that, things that building regs, exactly, that where we thought, okay, you know what, the staircase is going to be wide enough because we've got to get that extra layer of insulation. You've now got to move that wall a little bit. Now moving that wall isn't just a little partition wall because it's supporting the stairs. It's a spine wall. That's an extra 2 stills and a post. And I think, a lot of people look at renovations and conversions, in comparison to new builds, they're quite easy, but there's so many more what if factors because these are 100-year-old buildings and you're trying to reconfigure them to work in the way you want them to work. But it's been interesting. It's been good. Had a really good build team on that. Imperial Construction have been great. So I always make sure the people that I'm working alongside, I give them their credits. The architects, AA Drafting, again, have been amazing. That was purchased for 650, hoping to kind of hit a GDV of about 1.1 million. For that one, property should be coming on the market in the next sort of 4 to 8 weeks, sort of timelines permitting. Got planning, bought a consented flat that has plans to another flat in the loft with a business partner. That's just a flat, and then the loft space is becoming an additional unit. Again, was fully consented, but had a few issues being it was share of freehold.
Okay.
And people think, share of freehold, it means I own it, I can do what I want. But I actually sometimes run away from share of freehold because it means the person who has to sign your stuff off lives in the building. Yeah. And nobody wants to build up. No one wants to build inside. So they've got every reason. And also because they're not institutions, they kind of make decisions based on feeling and emotion and, well, I want this. And we've got to the end of it now on the bottom of things. And so that kick off on that. Just started on the 4 flats as well. That's a house into 4 flats. That was a long time coming. It's going back and forth through planning, but that's good. And then got planning on a recent scheme as well for 2 new build bungalows. Yeah. So starting on that very shortly, and then got a few things going through planning.
So you normally have a number of deals you do at any one moment in time, got pipeline building up as well. Yeah. It's good.
So pipeline is, I think, for growth, pipeline is important because the sign of a good property developer is one who's broke, like whose bank is empty. Like if you're sitting with money in your account, waiting for your next deal, you're probably not doing the best. And it sounds backwards, but you know, that's what it is. So
you should be out there looking for these deals all the time. And you should be spotting these gems as they come along.
So, and it's out like your family will complain and stuff like that. That it's like, oh, we big developer
cash poor.
Exactly, because it's the reality is, you know, I'm always trying to squeeze the extra time. Like, look, we're about to finish on this. I'm gonna get the money, and we're gonna exchange. Like, you know, you're always kind of pillar to post, but that's the game.
Yes.